The next step is to draw out the flap valves for the pump on a piece of leather. It's going to take quite a bit, as you can see, and one more here, and we may have to make some substitutes if we find some bad areas on the other side of this sheet. I do the drawing on the suede side so that I can see the working side of the material all the time. The thing to keep in mind is that you can see this is an awful lot of leather for a pump. It's almost twice as much leather, maybe it is twice as much leather as what is used in a Duart pump. But that means that every square inch of this flap valve material is under pressure from the pump, and that requires that this leather be extremely tight. It has to be even tighter than the Duart because there's twice as much of it. And the slightest amount of seepage through this leather multiplied by all of these flap valves that you can see that are required here is going to cause a tremendous amount of leakage in this pump and will render the piano useless. So make sure that whatever you cut it out of is nice and soft. It's like a garment leather. In other words, you wouldn't mind making a jacket or a fine piece of clothing out of this. It's got to be that nice in the suede department. Also, cutting this leather the direction that the cow runs, and that's the direction that the grain of the animal is in, and it doesn't stretch in that direction as much. Now, this is not pre-stretched. In other words, it is not industrially staked leather like the old original flap valves were. So in order to make sure that this works year after year without stretching to the point that there's no more spring left on the movable flap, we're going to have to make another change to the original design, or we are going to have a problem. So as much as I like to tell you that I don't change anything in the original design of an Ampico, I'll just tell you that it is not possible to correctly build an Ampico and not change a few things in the original design as you go along, because the original materials are no longer available. Well, we've got these cut. I made a paper model and drew circles on 4 of these, and then punched the other one out from underneath it so that they'd both be the same. The next thing to do is trim just a little bit so that they butt up against the black felt here but don't overlap it. And then there's some holes we have to find and punch out there for the stiffeners. Right here. That one is right here. Next thing is hot glue. This is new glue, and I think it's very important to get your best quality glue for this. You don't want it ever lifting on you. And before you ever glue any of your leather down, make sure that whatever's on the back of this strip will glue down. Quite often you'll find them waxed or lacquered, and they seem to be stuck well, and in a week or so they pop right off again. You sure don't want that. So here's how you set these in. Put plenty of glue down. Then I use a flat board to press it. If, like I did, you have a little bit of hot glue there that won't bother, it won't stick the flap, because we're going to take talcum powder and go over these anyway before we lay the flaps down. This just makes us absolutely sure that any moisture, acid, and contamination of the leather doesn't cause the flaps ever to stick to the seat. The next step is the stiffeners. Actually, the purpose of these rods is not to stiffen the flap, but to make sure that the flap touches this center board before it touches the sides. When a flap comes down like that and then curls down, gets sucked down tight, it's going to be quieter. Now on this one, I had something happen. It's a piece of wood that broke off from underneath this hole. It's down in here, and you want to make sure that you had something like that to happen, that you get that piece of wood out before you go on. It won't hurt the pump any, as long as it didn't break all the way through. This is good and sturdy. All you have to worry about is that doesn't get sucked into some place that you don't want it to be. Here's the piece. As you can see, it's not deep enough. This is only about 3/16 of an inch thick. This board here is 3/4 of an inch thick, so you've got plenty. The trick to making the flaps, very simple. We're going to put a special amount of glue right there on the smooth side. Plant this on some pneumatic cloth. I'm going to paint the pneumatic cloth with the glue. I'm going to plant the flap back on the pneumatic cloth and cut it off. We're going to trim all 8 inside flaps like this first, and then before they're fully dry, we're going to put their springs and clips on and get them on, and I'll show you how to form those flaps. The covers on the flaps are finished. Then take some hot glue, dab the end of a flap like that. And this aluminum that we bent over is going to go over on it. Now you can either pinch them together with pliers or hit them with a hammer. And I have been known to do both. Now that will hold just as it is, and it can be then put right on the pump bellows like this and wait until we've got them all on. Then we will form those and let them dry. Remember, the hot glue under this cover is still not dry yet either. Putting these flaps on now is not too difficult. We're going to use the spring, and what we've done here, since we have a perforated clip, the clip is squeezed over this, and then the finishing touches on the clip is with a hammer, gently curving the clip into the leather like that on the bottom side so that there's no way it can snag. Then the spring is put in from the bottom, or the leather side of the flap, and squeezed down with the pliers. That, and now these clips aren't even dry yet, so the next thing we're going to do is talcum powder them and also the seat. Here now is a little bit of talcum in a little bowl. We can talcum that, make sure we're not going to stick on that, and then just add an insurance, and you can, if you wish, talcum this here too, although I don't do it. Now then, the next thing I do is actually physically curve this like so. Try to curve it straight. That helps it form. The next thing I'm going to do now is actually wet that. Okay, this is a little oilier than I thought it was. That's alright. The first thing you do is put the screw into the spring and into the mounting hole like this. You put that on before you put the tacks on. Give the flap plenty of stretch. Then you put the center tack in down here at the bottom. And this goes through the seat leather and into the wood. Now then, this way you have a straight flap. If you tack this on first, quite often you won't have a straight flap, so put your spring on first. Now, flap, and if they tend to pucker between them here, well, just pull them out and put them in another place. Make sure that the back of the flap lays flat, that the front of the flap lays nice and flat. And now, after we do this, we're going to form it with the newspaper again, like so. We're going to clamp that with spring clamps. We're going to leave it overnight. When we come back to it, those flaps ought to be nice and tight on their seats. They should be dry and ready for testing. What we do then, after we decided that they're dry and ready to test, we make sure that there's no trash in these holes, of course. Then we'll put our flap guides on. We'll cover these with tape, all except for one. And we will actually draw with our mouth to see just exactly how tight those flaps are. And we should see the flaps on their own straighten out and suck down to the holes like that as we draw it. If we can't see it do that, then they're not. Replace it with a spring of about the same strength. And if you can't get any springs the same strength, and you've got one broken spring, it's better to replace them all with the weaker spring. These are little typewriter springs that you can buy in assortments certain places, and it's always nice to have a bunch of them on hand. Alright, now that we've got these pressed down and they're nice and dry, the flaps have no motion at all, even without the keepers on them. This one here has keepers on it now, and I'll show you how to put the keepers on. There's a little trick to that too. These are the little keepers. They're brand new. I made them out of welding rod, and the idea is that they should contact the flap right at its edges in particular. But there's a way to do that. So we're going to stuff it down in these little holes, tack it down like this, and you can always sight down it and see if it's touching on the edges. And if it's not quite touching all the way around, on just barely touching, stick a screwdriver under it and then plant its feet a little bit deeper than you have to. They've sprung up now. Now the place for this keeper to contact the flap is right there on its edges. And we don't care about the center. But all we care about is just the bare edges of that flap. If it will hold those edges down, then we know that that flap will be able to move. Now, if it doesn't move, you notice, it doesn't seem... Alright, now the reason it's not moving here is because the flap was stuck. That was because of the moisture. Right. And you see here, the flap is moving very well now, but it is also touching on the edges. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is put a drop of glue where those little feet are buried. Get it all over myself and go up and take a bath. That won't hurt anything, and this is good to see that other people make mistakes. There's always a way to clean this stuff up, and I'm not erasing these things and starting over because I want you to see that these things happen. Just fix it and go on. And they're down. So you always want to go back, make sure that the flap is going to move and that it's not stuck down where you've glued these. Is test them. So just to make sure that everything is nice and tight, we'll put some tape across the holes. In this other hole we'll put a tube and seal it with some duck seal tape or duck seal clay. This is a clay that never hardens, and you can put it, or at least it shouldn't harden. If it does harden and oxidize, it's very cheap stuff. Now then, we'll open this up. Now I hear a leak, but it's not coming from the flaps. Now, as you can see, these flaps suck down as soon as I put some pressure on them, but we'll have to find where this other leak is and fix it. And this is why we did the testing. Now there's only one that you cannot test quite this way, and that's the top bellows. There's another way to do this. You'll have to seal this off with some other kind of tape and then test it. It turns out the leak was in my tape. Now then, I'm in the process of cleaning these up. We don't need this excess powder. The powder we do want is already under the flaps. That's all we need. So we're going to clean this all up. Just blow them out real good. Then you can inspect the flaps again. Make sure there's no grit, no sawdust or anything underneath them. And you'll do this just by lifting them up and peeking under there. And after you've satisfied yourself that these are all tested and tight, then comes the covering.